Good morning everyone, my name is Ritesh and today I'll discuss current affairs issue which happened last week. So today we'll discuss one topic which is Biological Diversity Amendment Bill. Now let us discuss the whole topic in a brief first, because let's discuss what are the topics that we will discuss in this lecture, right? So first we'll discuss why this bill was in news, like why you have heard so much about this act or bill recently in your editorials or in your newspaper, right? Next we will discuss some key terms related to the bill, like the key terms like standing committee, which is a static part of polity, or select committee, right? Then we'll discuss the key points of the amendment bill, like what are the provisions that are being mentioned in this act, right? Next we'll discuss the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, because this act or bill is very much influenced by these kind of conventions, right? So we'll also discuss the Nagayo Protocol, right? We'll discuss that too. Then we'll discuss the Biological Diversity Act 2002. Like recently it has government has made some amendment to this act. That's why this bill is in news, but we'll discuss the static part of this act too, which was earlier present, right? Next, the bill came in your newspaper, in your headlines, right? So we'll discuss the concerns related to this whole bill, right? What are the concerns with respect to this bill, right? So we'll discuss that, and then we'll give a brief suggestion about what we want as a citizen of a country, right? So let us start with this topic first. So first let's discuss why this bill was in news. So recently this bill was tabled in parliament, right? And what the main feature was that the amendments seek to decriminalize certain provisions and bring more foreign investment in biological resources, right? So the bill focuses more on the investment that has been made into biological resources, and it attract more foreign investment. How this bill will attract more foreign investments, right, in the chain of biological resources. Just understand this, that this bill especially focuses on this particular thing, that how the amendment will bring more foreign investment into the biological resources, like including research, patent and commercial utilization without compromising the national interest. See, the act not only talks about the attraction of those foreign investments into these resources, but it also talks about that we don't have to compromise our national interests, right? Because these resources are our own, right? So we don't have to compromise those things on that. So, and also focus on attracting the foreign investment into these resources, so that these resources will grow, right? So there's so many aspects involved in this whole bill, which we will discuss in the key points, right? Now next was that the opposition parties, when the bill was tabled in parliament and the amendment talks about certain things like foreign investments and not compromising the national interest with respect to these things, right? The opposition parties has cited concerns over the bill, and it is being referred to as a select committee. Now focus on the term, that select committee, right? You can expect questions from these terms, like what is select committee, right, or what is standing committee, right? Because these are the things that are related to the parliamentary committee, right? So they demanded the bill to be referred to the Parliament Standing Committee, right? So the opposition parties are saying that these bills are to be referred to these kind of committees, right? That is why you have heard so much about this bill, right? So we've discussed that why this thing was in news. Next, let's discuss the select committee and standing committee, right? These are just keywords that you must have understood before entering into this topic. Right. So a select committee is formed for examining a particular bill, and its member is limited to members of parliament from one house. It's chaired by MPs from the ruling party, right? That is why opposition parties are saying that you have to refer these bills to standing committee, because select committee consists of member of parliaments from the ruling party, and select committees are to be formed for discussing specific or particular bill. These are formed with respect to a particular bill with a particular issue, right? And that is why these opposition parties are saying that this bill have to be referred to the standing committee. Why? Because standing committees are in our existence in their own, and that the whole existence of the standing committee is uninterrupted, and it is being usually reconstituted annually, right? So if you refer these bills, or if you refer these committees, opposition parties, see, you have to understand that what opposition parties are saying and why opposition parties are saying that this bill is to be referred to standing committee, not select committee, right? Because just understand this, select committee is to be formed for a special or particular type of bill, and the bill and the committee consists of members from the ruling party, right? And standing committee is something different. That is why opposition parties are saying the other thing, right? This is the basic concept, right? Next, so let's start with the bill, that is Biological Diversity Bill 2021, right? The amendment has been made to Biological Diversity Act 2002. Earlier this act was there, right? So let us discuss the key points of this bill. So the amendment streamlined the process of patenting for Indian researchers to encourage patenting. So the bill talks about the commercial use of these medicinal plants, right? So the bill actually talks about the process of patenting these kind of medicinal plants, right? So that the Indian researchers are being encouraged to do something with these medicinal plants. Basically, the whole idea is to encourage all these kind of commercial utilization of these plants, right? Next, for patenting, because see, patent is a component of intellectual property rights, right? So for this, regional patenting centers will be opened across the country. Now the bill talks about that we are talking about giving patents to the researchers regarding the medicinal plants. Now, if you want to give patent to these kind of medicinal plants or even products, say, you have to open regional centers for these things, right? So the bill says that regional patenting center will be opened across the country for this purpose. Now, the bill also looks to relax the rules in the Biological Diversity Act. Now, what are the loopholes in this, right? Because the bill is actually relaxing some of the aspects of the earlier Biological Diversity Act, and this is the main issue why opposition parties are opposing this bill, right? So we'll discuss this in detail, what are the aspects, right? So let's talk about 2002 Act in little pointers. Like the 2002 Act basically imposed a heavy compliance burden. Just understand this term, heavy compliance burden. That's why I highlighted this to you, on Indian medicine practitioners, seed sector industry and researchers, and made it hard to conduct collaborative research and investment. Now the 2002 Act was basically a difficult act for those who want to explore medicinal plants, and for the act was difficult for the medicinal practitioners, right? So that is why it is being said that 2002 Act imposes a heavy compliance burden. It means that you have to comply so much things, the process is so enormous and so complex actually, right? You have to do so many things to just use such kind of medicinal plants, right? So now the bill talks about the relaxing some of the provisions of the earlier act, right? Next is that this bill talks about the boosting the Indian medicine system. How? Now the bill talks about the biological resources, medicinal plants, right? It also talks about the Ayush practitioners, which I'll discuss in the next slide. See, why I'm saying all these things is because the basic aim of this bill is to boost the Indian medicine system. If this bill is encouraging Indian patenting across the country over the biological resources, over the medicinal plants for the Indian practitioners, medical practitioners, so you can understand in general that through this bill the government is expanding or boosting the Indian medicine system, so that private players or even medicinal practitioners will be encouraged to do something with related to research, right, with respect to the biological resources or medicinal plants, right. Next, the bill seeks to empower local communities to be able to utilize resources, particularly of medicinal value such as seeds. Now see, the bill not only talks about the Indian practitioners that will explore the options of using these medicinal plants, but it also talks about the local communities that are living there, that are actually growing these kind of things, and those that can use these kind of things, right. So it empowers local community so that they can able to utilize resources, right. In this we have given you an example such as seeds. Some kind of seeds are very important, so the bill talks about creating awareness also, right, so that these local communities can use these kind of resources, right, utilize these kind of resources fully, right. Because so many people or so many local communities that have been living in those areas don't know how to use them. Even they don't know what are the aspects of this, what are the potential use of these kind of medicinal plants. So the bill seeks to explore all these ideas, right. So basically the ambit of this bill is very wide, right. So it encourages Indian medical practitioners, and it also encourages the local communities that are living there, right. Next, the bill looks to encourage farmers to increase cultivation of medicinal plants. Now, the bill also talks about the farmers which are growing certain kind of things also grow medicinal plants, right. So it creates awareness among the farmers that what are the aspects, again I'm saying that what are the potential use of these kind of medicinal plants. If farmers are if farmers accept these kind of things, they can also grow. If they find some kind of income from these kind of things, they will obviously grow these kind of things, because eventually it will help them to grow, it will help them to actually increase their living standard also, right. So the bill also encourages Indian farmers to grow medicinal plants. Now next is these objectives. The objectives of this bill is to be achieved without compromising the objectives of UNCBD, which is known as UN Convention on Biological Diversity, right. So there are certain provisions or certain facts in UN Convention on Biological Diversity, and this bill is saying that we will not compromise the provisions of these conventions by encouraging these farmers or by relaxing the norms of the earlier Biological Diversity Act. So the bill says that we won't compromise any such thing with regard to the convention. The bill also talks about that we won't compromise national importance, we won't compromise our national interest with respect to this, right. Now let's just have a basic idea about the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, because it is related to this bill, right. So it's very important for you. If a comprehension comes in your exam with related to this topic like biological diversity bill, then you can refer to these kind of conventions, right, because questions are very factual, so they can come from this topic too, right. So let's talk about UN Convention on Biological Diversity. Some factual things, like it was adopted in 1992. Just remember these things, the dates you have to remember because it is the important convention for you, right. So it was adopted in 1992 and it entered into force in 1993 again, and India ratified in 1994. So these are just in line with this, like it adopted in 1992, entered into force in 1993, and India ratified this convention in 1994. So you just remember these 3 years with respect to the UN Convention on Biological Diversity. Right. Now, to implement the provision of the Act, the government established the National Biological Diversity Authority in 2003. Now, to implement the provisions of these Biological Diversity Act, which was in line with the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, right. So, the government established an authority which is known as National Biological Authority, right, NBA. in 2003, right? So it is the implementing authority which government established in 2003. So you also have to remember what is the authority. If a question comes like what is the name of the authority that implement all such kind of things, so National Biological Diversity Authority is the one, and it was established in 2003 by Indian government, right? Now in 1992 Earth Summit, 2 landmark binding agreements were signed. One of them is being the UN Convention on Biological Diversity. The one was the Convention on Climate Change, right? So these 2 conventions are being adopted in 1992, which is known as Earth Summit. You have to remember this 1992 wala summit because it is very important. It is known as Earth Summit, right? So that's why it is important. So in that year, 2 special landmark binding agreements were signed, and one of them was UN Convention on Biological Diversity, which I just mentioned that it was adopted in 1992, it was entered into force in 1993, and India ratified this convention in 1994, right? And the other one, the second convention which was adopted or signed in 1992 Earth Summit was Convention on Climate Change. Again, this whole thing revolves around the environment concerns, right? These 2 conventions are related to environment, right? So it is very important for you because environment news are very important recently, because even India is focusing so much on environment pollution and air pollution. Everything related to environment is very important for you, right? Next is it's the secretariat is in Montreal, Canada. Now when you read the UN organs or the UN conventions and all these international treaties and all those things like ICJ or the Criminal Court of Justice, right? International Criminal Court of Justice. So you have to also remember the secretariat or the venue where it locates, right? So the secretariat here is Montreal, Canada, right? Now only 2 member states of the UN, United Nations, are not parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity. What are the 2 nations? The USA and the Vatican City, right? So you also have to remember these factual things, like there are 2 member states of the UN which are not part of the Convention on Biological Diversity. What are the 2 member states? First one is USA and second one is Vatican, right? Then there are 196 countries that are party to the Convention on Biological Diversity, right? You also have to remember this, because see, these things are again very factual. You don't have to understand the concept behind this, because again, what do you have to understand behind this, that how many members are there? You just have to remember this thing, right? So 196 members are there, are party to Convention on Biological Diversity. Now let's discuss the goal of the convention, which is very similar to the goal of the the aim of the Biological Diversity Act of India, right, 2002, right? So the goal of the convention are first conservation of biological diversity, second one is sustainable use of the components of the diversity, and third one is fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from the genetic resources. Now these 3 are the goals of UN Convention on Biological Diversity, and the bill what the bill says, it won't compromise the goals of the UNCBD. That is, they won't compromise these things with respect to the bill, right? The bill says that we won't compromise any such of the goals that are being mentioned in the UNCBD, right? Next, again, let's go back to the key points of the act, right? So this was all about the UN Convention on Biological Diversity and what are the goals, what are the members, and how it is being adopted, what are the years involved in this whole process, right? So let us go back again to the key points, right? So again, the act seeks to decriminalize certain provisions in the chain of biological resources. Now the new bill seems to relax certain provisions of the earlier act in chain of biological resources. Like with respect to biological resources, they seek to relax certain provisions, certain norms of the earlier act, right? Next is these changes that are being made with respect to this bill in consonance with India's ratification of Nagoya Protocol in 2000 2012. Now this protocol is again important, very important. UN Convention on Biological Diversity, and this protocol is very important for you because these are the static part of your syllabus. If you consider this topic as your current part, then these two conventions or protocol are the static part of your syllabus basically, right? So now it allows for foreign investment. Now this protocol allows for foreign investment in research in biodiversity. However, this investment will necessarily have to be made through Indian companies involved in biodiversity research. Now the bill allows foreign investment in research in biodiversity, right? So the bill talks about that foreign investment will be there in research in biodiversity resources or biological resources, but this investment will have to be made. If a foreign company have to invest in biological resources in India, they have to do this through Indian companies, right, which are involved in biodiversity research. So if a foreign company wants to invest in Indian biological diversity or like biological resources in our country, they have to do this from Indian companies which are involved in this whole thing, right? So they can do this through Indian companies which are actually doing these kind of work, right? You have to remember this. This is very important. Now, for foreign entities, the approval from the National Biodiversity Authority is necessary. Now, again, for foreign entities to do such kind of things, they have to inform, they have to get approval from the National Biodiversity Authority because it is the implementing agency, right? That I have just mentioned that Government of India established this in 2003, right? So the next next point is exempting Ayush practitioners. Now this was the main concern also, right, of the opposition. The bill seeks to like relax certain norms. So this was the norms that are also being relaxed in the new bill. So they exempt the new bill exempt Ayush practitioners. What they are exempting? Now the bill seeks to exempt registered Ayush medical practitioners and people accessing codified traditional knowledge, among others, from giving prior intimation to state biodiversity boards for accessing biological resources for certain purposes. Now, what happened is this new bill seeks to relax certain provisions, right? Now the bill is saying that they are exempting Ayush practitioners from using such kind of resources without informing these state biological diversity boards. Now they don't have to inform, like see people actually, they don't have to inform state biological diversity boards for using these kind of resources, right? So this was the main concern, that this is kind of piracy. It will enhance the black marketing of such kind of things, right, which are very important, which are actually resources of our country, and they will do this through the piracy mode, right? So this was the main concern over this bill. That is why opposition parties are saying that this bill has to be referred to standing committee. Now let's talk about the Biological Diversity Act, right? Okay, so let's talk about the Biological Diversity Act. Now the Biological Diversity Act, and we say a three-tier structure to regulate the access to biology. Now if you have to access biological resources, you have a three-tier structure as per the Biological Diversity Act 2002, the earlier act. So what are the three-level structure? First one is National Biological Diversity Authority, again which I have mentioned. Second one is State Biodiversity Board, and third one is Biodiversity Management Committees at local level. Now there's a three-tier level. First one is at national level, which is known as National Biodiversity Authority. Second one is at state, so State Biodiversity Board, and third one is at local level, which is known as Biodiversity Management Committees, right? So you have to remember these three tier structure which was mentioned in Biological Diversity Act 2002. Right. Now the act which was in 2002 also says that the central government, in consultation with the National Biological Diversity Authority, National Biodiversity Authority, NBA, shall, under this act, the central government in consultation with NBA shall notify threatened species and prohibit or regulate their collection, rehabilitation and conservation. Designate institutions as repositories for different categories of biological resources. Now central government, in consultation with the National Biodiversity Authority, they can notify threatened species, they can prohibit or regulate the collection of such kind of species, right? So this act has some powers. In the first slide itself I said that it was the compliance thing was very important in the earlier act. So these kind of things were there in the earlier act, which is very important. Like the central government has power to notify a threatened species with consultation with the NBA, which is National Biodiversity Authority, right? Next is Nagoya Protocol, right? You have to remember this again. I have mentioned UNCBD and I have discussed UNCBD, what are the provisions and what are the goals and what are the years that are being important years with respect to that convention. Now let us discuss this protocol. Now under this protocol, it is mandated that benefits derived from the use of biological resources are shared in a fair and equitable manner among the indigenous and local communities. Again, now see, under this protocol, it was mentioned that the benefits you derive from use of biological resources must be shared in a fair and equitable manner among the local communities, right? Among the indigenous local communities that live there, right? So the new bill also says the new bill is in consonance with this protocol, that the bill also talks about the fair and equitable use of these kind of resources with the indigenous communities. Like I have said, that the bill talks about that to benefit local communities, they want to create awareness among the local communities, they want to encourage farmers to grow such kind of medicinal plants, right, in order to give them a very wide ambit so that they can grow these kind of things. They can actually eventually enhance the income of their own, right, through this thing, right? So that is why Nagoya Protocol is very important, that the fair equitable use was very important, and the mention of the indigenous communities and local communities and how you create awareness and how you develop these kind of things with respect to these communities is very important, right? Next one is, when an Indian or foreign, under this protocol, when an Indian or foreign company or even individual access biological resources such as medicinal plants and associated knowledge with respect to these biological resources or these medicinal plants, it has to take prior consent from the National Biodiversity Board. Now, when an Indian or foreign company or individual wants to access biological resources, medicinal plants, they have to take prior consent from the National Biodiversity Board. You can't just take use of such kind of things and doesn't inform and won't inform such kind of board or authority, because authority is there to take such kind of measures, right? So you have to inform the National Biodiversity Board before accessing some biological resources or even medicinal plants. Now, the board can impose a benefit sharing fee or royalty or impose conditions so that company shares the monetary benefit from commercial utilization of these resources with local people who are conserving biodiversity in the region. This is very important. Why local communities or why these indigenous communities are very important? Because these are the people who are conserving biodiversity in those regions, right? That is why government is focusing on these communities, because if you harm those communities, they are the one actually who are conserving the biodiversity in that region. So there are so many people involved in the whole process. So if you want to create something, if you want to exploit the resources of biodiversity, so the board will impose a certain kind of penalty or even royalty or even fee, benefit sharing fee, or impose conditions that the company have to share monetary benefit of those resources with these local communities, because these are the communities who are actually conserving the biodiversity in those regions, right? That is why this whole community wala issue is very important. These indigenous communities are very important, right? One thing is again common, that if a question comes that why these communities are very important, it is because these are the people, very simple, these are the people who are actually conserving the biodiversity in that region, right? So next one is concern by the experts, right? What are the concern by the experts? So let us discuss what are the concerns by experts, because this bill is very important. So now I have cleared the whole topic, that why this bill was being opposed by the opposition parties. The main issue, the two main issue was that this bill was referred to select committee, and the opposition parties want to give this bill or refer this bill to a standing committee. And second is that bill seeks to relax certain provisions, that they are exempting Ayush practitioners from using such kind of things, and this is the main concern also. So let us discuss the concern in a little bit detail. First one is trade over conservation. Now the experts are saying that this bill prioritizes the intellectual property and commercial trade at the expense of the Act's key aim of conserving biological resources. Now the first thing that the bill mentions is that they will relax certain provisions, or they start patenting the biological resources and all. Right. So the experts are saying that this bill aims to focus mainly on trade over conservation. Right. The main aim has to be conservation of these biological resources, but the bill focuses more on trade and intellectual property concerns over the conservation of these biological resources. Right. First. Second is threat of biopiracy. Right. Now first let us understand what is biopiracy. Now biopiracy is the practice of exploiting naturally occurring genetic or biochemical material in coherence. Right. So this is actually a practice of exploiting naturally occurring genetic things. Right. So you in this case you are exploiting what? Biological resources. You are starting the practice of biopiracy with respect to the biological resources of our country. So and now we'll discuss how this biopiracy is related with this bill. Now the provision says that the exemption to Ayush practitioners is there, right? The bill talks about the exemptions to Ayush practitioners, that they don't have to inform state biodiversity boards in order to access some kind of information or even medicinal plants. Now the experts are saying that the exemptions to these kind of practitioners no longer need to take approvals would pave the way for biopiracy. Now they can easily they don't have to inform the state biodiversity boards or the authorities, right? So what they can do is they can actually exploit these medicinal plants or biological resources, and this would pave the way to biopiracy, right? Next one is Marginalizing Biodiversity Management Committee. Now the proposed amendments, the amendments that comes in the bill, allow for state biodiversity boards to represent biodiversity management committees to determine determine the terms of benefit sharing, right? So the act also have to define what are the terms of benefit sharing, what are the benefits that are being shared with these local communities and all these things, right? So you can't just marginalize these biodiversity management committees through this bill, through the enactment of this kind of bill, right? Next is under the Biodiversity Act 2002, that the earlier act, national and state biodiversity boards are required to consult the biodiversity management committees, right, while taking any decision relating to the use of biological resources. Earlier, just like I have said, that earlier act was heavy on compliance thing, that you have to do so many things in order to comply or in order to use or access information with respect to the biological resources, but these kind of things are being relaxed in the new bill, right? Next one is sidelining local communities, right? The experts are saying that the bill also exempts cultivated medicinal plants from the purview of this act. Now this term is important, cultivated medicinal plants. Now the experts are saying what? This new bill exempts cultivated medicinal plants from this act. It is practically impossible to detect which plants are cultivated and which are from the wild, right? There must be if you are saying that the cultivated medicinal plants are being exempted from the purview of this act, the critics are arguing about the fact that how you will determine which plants are cultivated and which are from the wild, right? You have to make a proper distinction between these two, and this is very, very difficult, right? So this again becomes these are just the loophole that government finds. So this is the main issue. Now how you will differentiate between which plants are cultivated and which are from the wild, again this will become a serious issue and time taking process in which you have to determine which plants are from the wild and which plants are for cultivated, right? Next is this. Now this provision, the exemption of cultivated medicinal plants could allow large companies to evade the requirement for prior approval or share the benefit with local communities, right? Again, if the bill exempts cultivated medicinal plants from the purview of this act, now the big corporations, companies will exploit these kind of things, and they will not share the benefit of these kind of resources with the local communities. And that is why the experts are saying that through this provision they are sidelining local communities. Through this bill they are focusing on local communities and indigenous communities with respect to that region, but there are certain provisions which are actually sidelining these local communities. They are finding loopholes with respect to that, right? Now in last we'll discuss the way forward or some suggestions with respect to the biological diversity bill 2021. Now the effective implementation of the Forest Right Act, right? So the government must make an effort to build trust between its agencies in the area and the people who depend on these forests by treating them as equal citizens like everyone else in the country. Now the experts are also saying that the government must have to make an effort to build trust between the agencies of the government and the people that are being affected, or the people that are being living in those areas, right? Second is integration of international treaties. Now the bill says that they are in consonance with the Nagoya Protocol and the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, but again the implementation of these protocol cannot work in isolation, and thus also you can say that it is in consonance with the provisions of this act, it is in consonance with the convention and those protocols, but you have to do this practically. You have to enhance the provisions of this act, and things must be so clear that we can derive benefit from these things, right? Next is biodiversity register. Now the aim to document folk knowledge of status, use, history, ongoing changes and forces driving changes in biodiversity resources should be managed. Now the traditional knowledge of these medicinal plants and all these things are very useful. Now we are suggesting that these biodiversity register can be useful to preserve the rights of farmers or even the indigenous communities that are living over the traditional over this area, and the knowledge of these people are very important, right, with respect to a particular variety of medicinal plants. So the government or even authorities have to register such kind of things. They have to maintain a proper information with respect to these kind of medicinal plants, because the indigenous communities or the communities that are living there, local communities, are very informed, or they know certain kind of things more than we know, right? So you have to maintain a people biodiversity register with respect to this, right? So that's all about this topic. This topic is very important. Again, why I'm saying this, because it is respect to the environment thing, and with respect to this, these kind of things are very frequently coming in your newspapers or in your editorials, right? So that's all about the Biological Diversity Amendment Bill 2021. So thank you so much.